What is going on, everyone? My name is Jason Vinson, and I am a wedding and documentary photographer based out of Northwest Arkansas. And today I'm going to take you on a little journey from capture to delivery. I obviously can't walk through every single image of an entire wedding and explain how everything was taken, but what I'm going to do is walk through about 5 of my favorite images from an amazing New Zealand wedding that I just got back from and explain how each image was taken, as well as sort of walk through kind of what inspired the photo or where the idea for the image came from. Then we are going to take a little trip into Aftershoot to kind of give these images some extra tender love and care. And then we're going to jump into Fundy to design a final product. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here within Lightroom, what we have is just the natural light image of this scene. And what I was drawn to is the dress that was kind of hanging in this doorway. Now, this is a perfectly acceptable image, but what I wanted to do is just draw a little bit more attention to the bride. And so the first thing that I decided I wanted to try was just to light her with an off-camera flash and bring the ambient exposure down a little bit. So what I did is I set up my off-camera flash kind of hiding behind the dress here. And then I had a Magmod grid attached to it just directly at her. The grid helps focus this light so it's only shining on her and not filling in the rest of the room. And this is going to be the results that this gave me. So settings wise, I'm at ISO 250, 72 millimeters, f2.8, and 1/2500th of a second. Now, this image is good, but I wanted a little bit more attention on the dress as well. And the stuff reflecting in the windows was also a little bit distracting. And so what I ended up doing is I changed up my lighting setup as well as the position that I was shooting from. I got further back, which helped bring in more sky so that it would just be like dress and then sky. And then I did something kind of interesting with my light. Instead of firing it directly at her, what I ended up doing is firing it at the dress. And so what this does is, because the dress is a fabric, the dress kind of absorbs a lot of that light and it sort of glows. And then it also acts as sort of a natural reflector. And so it's going to reflect the light off of the dress onto the bride. And so this is what that result looks like. Now, the light on her is nice and soft because instead of the light coming from the off-camera flash, it's now coming from this much larger light source, which is the dress. And then the glowing dress also just stands out a lot more because there's not all of the distractions on the reflection, because I'm down lower and shooting from further back, and so it's just dark sky. I'm also at a lot darker of an exposure. Here I'm at 1/8000th of a second, f3.2, 122 millimeters, and again, still ISO 250. So this is kind of the end result for this setup that I preferred the most. Now, the next image that we have is up on a mountaintop. Now, this wedding was super cool because they actually had a helicopter fly us and all of the wedding party onto this mountain. We did the ceremony, and now we're doing couples portraits. And the helicopters are coming and they're taking the wedding party and they're taking them back down to the airport while we're doing portraits. And so we have the couple walking across this ridgeline here, and as they're walking across the ridgeline, one of the helicopters starts to fly by, and he flies through the scene as he comes around to land on the mountaintop to pick up some more of the guests. And so when I see this happen, I run over to one of the guests and tell them to ask the helicopter pilot just to do that exact same thing again as they're taking off. And then as soon as I tell them that, I run back over because I don't have enough time to ask the helicopter pilot and then also still do what I need to do, because what I decided I wanted to do is I wanted to backlight the couple with an off-camera flash. And so while everyone's getting onto the helicopter and the helicopter's getting ready to take off, I'm running across the mountain, setting up an off-camera flash behind the couple, and then running back over to my position to shoot this image. And so this is what the results are. So this is ISO 250, 70 millimeters, f2.8, and 1/80,000th of a second on my shutter speed. And so shooting at 1/80,000th of a second allows me to really draw away the ambient light while also backlighting them with the off-camera flash so they have this like nice backlit glow. And then all of the backlit light from the sun, which is actually fairly high right now because it's not high noon, but it's like 3-4 p.m. I mean, it's still fairly high in the sky, but because I'm underexposing it so much, it has kind of this like sunsetty look. So the final results I was really, really happy with for here. Okay, now let's jump into a dance floor scene. Now, one of the really cool things about this wedding is that the groom's side of the bridal party and the bride's side of the bridal party, they actually got into this like really fun dance battle going back and forth. One of the scenes is this where like all of the groomsmen laid on the floor and the groom laid on top of him, and then they kind of like rolled him across the dance floor. Now, lighting wise, the way I shoot all of my dance floor stuff is I usually have one 8200 Pro with a full Magmod CTO gel behind my subjects, giving me this nice warm backlight. And then I have a Godox V100. Now, while this is an on-camera flash, I don't actually have it attached to my flash. I still trigger this with the trigger that's mounted to my camera, and I just hold this in my hand. And what this gives me the flexibility to do is I can put this light wherever I want it, and my camera can be separate from it. And so for this scene, as they're rolling across the floor, I have my camera up high so that I can show all of them laying on the floor and kind of get rid of all of the distractions that are along the wall. And then I take this light and I'm holding it down low so that it's still going to fire across and light them like you would generally light a person, where it's kind of like even with their face, even though they're down on the floor. And so this is this image for the reception here. One thing that I always try to do at every wedding is take some really cool and dramatic nighttime images. And so we head outside, and the couple decided to spray a bottle of champagne. So they each had a bottle of champagne. I went through all of the process of like getting the best spray out of a bottle of champagne. And I have one 8200 Pro with a Magmod grid on it. And so what this grid is doing is giving me this nice spotlight effect on the couple. Otherwise, if it was just a bare light, it would light up all of the grass in the foreground here, and it would also light up all of these bushes here. But I specifically have this light placed in the direction that they're gonna spray, but a little bit behind them. What this does is it gives them a little bit more of a dramatic light because the shadows are gonna be on the camera side of their face, but it also is gonna backlight the champagne a little bit more rather than front light it, which just helps all of these little particles and stuff glow. And so that's how I got this image. But then directly after this, I took the 8200 Pro, grid is still on it, but I threw a CTO gel on it. And similar to the backlight image that we had with the helicopter, I'm lighting them from behind with a full CTO gel and a grid. And so they're gonna get this like nice glow, but the light's not gonna spread onto the ground a ton. But similar to the dress image, the light is reflecting off of her dress and his clothes and kind of giving the ground this like nice soft glow. And then once you white balance for the CTO gel, because it's this like really warm light, everything else goes to a nice cool, which is why now the sky has this like a lot deeper, rich blue tones in comparison to the champagne image where I used just like the bare natural color of the flash. And so these two elements kind of give you an idea of why you might want to use a CTO gel even when you're shooting like at nighttime and you're not actually color correcting. You can use that to kind of bring in a lot more drama to the skies. Now, these are kind of like some of my favorite images from the wedding, but one thing I will do is before I go into anything else after everything's edited is I love to retouch every single image from the wedding. I used to just kind of like retouch my favorites, and it really stood out that like, oh, this image got a lot more love and care than the rest of the gallery. And so I started retouching every single image. And that is just an impossible process if you actually do that manually. Thankfully, Aftershoot has the ability now to retouch with AI. And so it will retouch an entire wedding gallery for you. And all you have to do is just move a couple sliders and then copy everything throughout. So let's go ahead and dive into Aftershoot here. I already have all of my selected images pulled in. And now the way that you access this is after you import within Aftershoot, you will have a new retouching tab. This is still in beta, so there's still a lot more cool things to come, but I want to give you a quick overview of what this is going to look like. And so what I like to do is I want to retouch an image so that it doesn't look retouched. I just kind of want to like give it a little bit more polish, but I don't want it to have that like high fashion beauty look. I just want it to be just all the images to be a little bit cleaner and get rid of things like, you know, blemishes and kind of minimize wrinkles, but not totally remove wrinkles. And so one thing that I will do is I will just find kind of one image. Let's go ahead and just pick this one here and let's let it load up. And I will just give kind of a quick little edit to it. So I'm gonna remove all of the acne, and then I'm going to do just a little bit of blemish removal. I'm usually in like the 30 to 40 range on everything else here. Forehead wrinkles, I'm gonna do around 30. Eye bags, let's do around the same. Smile lines about the same. Teeth, I don't like to brighten my teeth, but I do want to whiten them, but I don't want them to be like, you know, toothpaste commercial white, but just a little bit. So we'll do something in that range. I don't like to brighten my face, but I do like to give just a little bit of smoothing, somewhere in this range. Eye brightness, about the same. And then everything else I kind of leave the same. And so real quick, I will show you a before and after. Let's go ahead and zoom in here a little bit. So here is after, and here is before. So again, like you can see that it's retouched. If you were looking at it from a clean slate, it doesn't look retouched, right? And so that's the goal, right? I just want to polish it just a little bit. Okay, so right now, because this is just in beta, there isn't the ability to just click a button and have all of these synced to all of the images. Thankfully, if you do download the beta, what you can do is you can just do Control-C to copy the settings, and then you can just click on another image and hit Control-V to paste it. And then once everything is applied, you will have your nice retouched image. You can also do Control-A to select all of the images and then do Control-V to paste it across an entire gallery, which is what I would do right now if I wanted to sync it through everything, but I don't want to have to sit through it loading real quick. But one thing I want to point out before we move into Fundy to design the album is for this image here at the very end. And so I'm going to do the same thing where I'm just going to Control-V and paste my settings onto this image. And one thing you'll notice that it did is it removed the tears from this bridesmaid's face, which is what I don't want to happen. So keep in mind that it can retouch out things that you don't want. Now, the cool thing about this is that I am pasting this to all faces, but what I can do is I can say show face frame, and I can select this specific person, and you know, she doesn't have any acne or blemishes or anything like that, and so I can just remove those sliders, and then it won't think that the tears are blemishes and have them removed. And so what happens is that they will come back here whenever this gets updated. Is it updates? Okay. And so now she has this nice retouch. Her wrinkles and all that fun stuff are kind of minimized, but the tears remain there. And so that's one of the cool things that I like about this software here is that I can paste my settings to every single face. And then if there's a specific person that I don't want to have something retouched out, I can select that person and then just remove that slider from that individual person, which I think is super useful. But it's also something to keep in mind where if you're like me and you just want to paste your retouch across an entire gallery, keep in mind that it might affect things like, you know, tears, birthmarks. I've seen it remove like jewelry sometimes. And so you just want to make sure that that type of thing isn't happening for you. Okay, so now we have all of the images done, they're exported, and now we get to actually design a final product for our client. And so what we're going to do is we are going to jump into Fundy. Okay, I'm going to start a new project. Let's call this Amazing New Zealand Wedding. Okay, create the project. Let's import our photos. Okay, and now once everything is imported, you have this new Design for Me feature, and I have my own saved, which is going to simultaneously build me a 12 by 12 dream books album, as well as thank you cards, a slideshow, as well as wall art. So I don't need to do anything because once I do it one time, I save it as a preset. So now all I have to do is just say auto design and it's done. And so I can jump in and I can look at wall art, I can do my thank you cards, I can do the slideshow. But for this video here, we're going to jump into the album, and this is the album that it designed. And so I have my album like auto designer set up to just quickly design me spreads with 4 images each in chronological order all the way to the very end. Now you have the ability in Fundy to set it up to where you can like rate an image as a 5-star, and if it has a 5-star, then it'll be a full page spread, or if it's a 4-star, it'll be a larger image, and it can do all kinds of cool stuff like that. I'm a lot more of a visual person, and so I want to move images around and drag them here and there to see how they actually look. And so I have found that just designing spreads like this makes it so I can really quickly see everything laid out, and then I can drag things around from there. And now I'm not gonna have you sit through and watch me design an entire album, but I will walk through a couple key things that I like to make sure that I do while designing an album. And so the very first thing that I'm gonna do is just pick a hero image for the cover of this album, which is going to be that helicopter image that we walked through at the beginning of the video. So I'm just gonna scroll through here until I find it. It's right here. So I'm gonna drag that over to the cover. I'll adjust that a little bit, and so somewhere about there is looking good. And then from there, I like to do a quick scroll through and look for my images that are going to be good as a full page spread. Now, some of these like hero images that I took, while they would be an amazing full page spread, they won't actually work because a lot of them have a center composition, and images that have a center composition don't usually make a good full page spread because the main element of the image lies within the seam of the book. And so I like to just scroll through and find the images that I know I want to be full pages. That way I can then design the rest of the book with those images in mind being absent, if that makes sense. I would like this one to be a full page spread, but again, this is what I was talking about where the main element is lying across the seam. And so a way that I'm gonna get around that is I'm gonna use this kind of detail shot of the helicopter, and I'm gonna bring it over here. And then I'm gonna choose my layout, and then I'm gonna choose a layout like this one, where there's part of it that takes up the majority of it, and I'm gonna have that be this. And then I'm just gonna flip this. So it's kind of like this helicopter detail, but then the majority of the spread is still this element here. Okay, so something like this I think is gonna be really good. This one might be a good full page spread. Yeah, I like that. So one thing that I do is that the majority of my couples get a 10 by 10 album, but I pre-design as a 12 by 12. Now, this is giving me a little warning saying that this needs to be like upsampled. Look, it says upscaled by 38% in order to fit a 12 by 12 resolution. But I know that if this is going to be printed at a 10 by 10, that this will still make a good full page, like the resolution will still be good for a 10 by 10. And so you just want to keep that in mind. And so I know that if this client upgrades to a 12 by 12, that I might have to do something like redesign this spread, or I might have to try and upscale this image or let Fundy upscale it so that it will fit within the resolution of the now 12 by 12 album size. But I'm designing at a 12 by 12 knowing that the majority of these are going to be printed at 10 by 10. Another thing that I like to do is I like to combine images with the same exposure into similar spreads. And so you can kind of see that here. So like this image and this image, while both are the same wedding, they're totally different feelings, right? But this image, now these do go together. And so I'll combine these two images to make sure like the whole spread is cohesive. Okay, so let's go ahead and do something like, I like this, but I want this one to be here. So something like that looks good. I also like to look for images that work off of each other as far as like a wide and a tight of a similar moment. So a good example is going to be this helicopter image here. So this image and this image are basically the exact same scene. One is just wide and one is tight. And then I will take the wide one and make it bigger and then have this tight one just kind of be a supporting image. So I'm going to choose this layout, I believe. And then you want to watch your crop lines here. And so these lines are showing how the album could potentially be cut. And so I want to make sure that the important details like this helicopter rotor lie within this element, whereas here it might get cut out. And so I want to just drag it over as much as possible. And then I'm going to center up this part of the image. And then that's going to look good for me, something like that. Okay. Another thing that I like to do, and there's a good example of this up here at the top, let me go back up, is I like to make sure that I have the entire spread either all in color or all in black and white. And so for this spread here, I have this image as a black and white. And so what I could do is I could go back into Lightroom and I can reconvert this and do a color version, or I could go and I can re-edit these 3 images as black and white. But I don't want to go through all of that work until I know the client actually wants this to be a spread within the book, because I'm essentially designing a ton of spreads, and then later on, me and the client are going to get together and they're going to cut images, they're going to cut spreads, they're going to move things around until they get the book that they want. And I just kind of help them through that design process. But in the initial design, I want to kind of show what's expected as far as like design wise goes. And so while this spread looks good, what I'm going to do is actually, I have found that the black and white number 2 is close enough to my black and white conversion that I do, so that I can just go in here and I'll just change all of these 3 to black and white. And then that way the entire spread is black and white, so I can model that an entire spread is either black and white or color. And then later on, when it comes to exporting the final design, I can go in and I can redo these as black and whites if I so wish, or I could turn this to color if it ends up being on a spread that they decide they want to be all color. While everything is laid out in a chronological way, I'm not opposed to moving images around in a sense that they make a little bit more sense as a story, even though they weren't necessarily taken at the same time. So a good example is going to be this, where here the groom and one of his groomsmen are steaming the bridesmaids' dresses, which I thought was really cool. But there's also a scene here where the bridesmaids are kind of getting ready. And so while these weren't taken at the same time, they make sense on the same spread because they're kind of like the group getting together, getting ready together, right? And so I'm going to choose a layout here. I think I want them both to just be 3:2 ratios here with this border. So I kind of like something like this. And then another example is going to be this whiskey one. And then I would choose maybe something like this for this spread. And then this whiskey glass, there is one of her drinking whiskey later on. And so I'm going to add these to the same spread, because I generally like to have a spread be like all of groom prep, all of bride prep. But every once in a while, I do like to try and find an area of the spread where I can have, you know, bride prep and groom prep kind of like intermixed together. And so this is a good example where, you know, they're both drinking whiskey. They're both getting ready separately, but they could be on the same spread because story-wise it kind of makes sense, right? And so I think I like this spread for that. So real quick, let me go through and see. So like, again, here would be another example of black and white versus color. So I definitely know that I want this moment of dad seeing his daughter all dressed up for the wedding for the first time. I want the black and whites together, and then I want the colors together. And so here I would do something like this. And then I would have this kind of like first look moment here on this spread. And again, I want to make sure that the important details aren't getting cut off by these margins here. So I don't want it to be too close to the edge, right? I want to make sure that I'm outside of my margins here. And I'm going to say, show this like little twirl. And then he's going to get a little emotional here. And then I'm going to have this one. And I like this spread for here. Okay, so something like this, right? And then again, this will be a good scenario where I'm using 2 black and white images taken at different times to kind of help the story flow, right? So we go from the first look into getting onto the helicopter. And so a good transitional moment might be this, where, you know, they're still here at their first look while also combining black and white images. And now he's getting ready to get onto the helicopter. But I want to make sure that the aspect ratio for him is going to maintain the 3:2 ratio, because I want to be able to see the helicopters on either end. And then I want to make sure that it flows with the story. So I want to flip this so that it's first look, black and white here, and then it transitions into helicopter moment. And then from there, we can go into, let me just cut this image out. And then from there, it would go into this, where they're getting onto the helicopter and flying away, which would be something like this. Okay. But then again, story-wise, I want them to be on the helicopter and then flying away. So I had flipped this, right? So here they are walking towards the helicopter and then flying away. And then the bride gets her same moment. So here she is, the wind's blowing because they're getting ready to get on a helicopter, and then they're walking up to the helicopter. And then again, aspect ratio wise, I want to be able to see all of the veil, whereas if this was a square, it's kind of too close to the edge here. And so she's going to be here on a 3-2, and then I'll keep this square of them getting onto the helicopter. Okay, so I don't want to dive too much deeper into the album design, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of some of the key elements that I like to look out for when designing an album. Hopefully you guys learned a lot as far as how MagMod helped me create some images that might have been impossible otherwise, how Aftershoot helped me really refine and polish the images before heading into Fundy. And Fundy obviously made it just super easy to design an amazing album. So with that, I hope that you found this useful, and I'll catch you on the next one.